My grandmother was not a woman who said things she did not mean. I want to establish that first, because what I am about to tell you is the kind of thing that, when you hear it, you start looking for reasons to discount the person saying it. You look for signs of confusion, signs of age, signs of a mind that has started making connections that are not there. My grandmother was 81 years old when she told me this. She was not confused. She had just beaten me at Scrabble for the 4th consecutive time, which she pointed out, unprompted, as evidence that her mind was working fine. She was right. Her mind was working fine. What she told me that afternoon, sitting at her kitchen table in Watauga County, North Carolina, with the Scrabble board still between us and the Blue Ridge outside the window going purple in the late light, was something she had told no one for 63 years. She told me because she was 81, and she had decided that 63 years was long enough, and because I had asked, not about this specifically, I had asked her, in the way that you ask old people general questions when you love them, and you understand that time is becoming finite. I had asked her if there was anything she had never told anyone. She looked at me for a long moment, and then she said, "Yes." And then she told me. Her name is Loretta Voss. She is 84 years old now. She lives in the same house she has lived in for 57 years, on a road in Watauga County that does not appear on most GPS systems, which she considers a point of pride. She grew up on the same road. In 1961, she was 18 years old. She had just finished high school. She was going to go to the Teachers College in Boone in the fall. That summer was the last summer of her childhood, in the way that the summer before college is always the last summer of something. She spent most of it outside, walking the ridges, reading in the meadow above the house, doing the things you do when you have a finite amount of time to do them, and you know it. The Blue Ridge in summer is not a dramatic landscape. It is an old landscape, green and soft and folded, the ridges rounded by time, the forests dense with oak and hickory and poplar, the understory thick with rhododendron that blooms in June, and then goes dark and waxy and forms tunnels on the hillsides that you can walk through at noon and feel like it is dusk. She had grown up in that landscape. She knew it the way you know a place you have walked since you could walk, which is why, in July of 1961, when something in it was different, she knew immediately. She had gone up to the meadow above the house, the one she had been reading in all summer. It was a Tuesday afternoon, hot, the way the Blue Ridge gets hot in July, not dry heat, wet heat, the kind that sits on you. She had her book. She had a jar of water. She settled into her usual spot, in the shade at the edge of the meadow where the oaks began, and she felt, within a few minutes of sitting down, that she was not alone. She writes about this. I say, writes because she gave me a letter, 3 pages, handwritten, 2 weeks after she told me, because she wanted me to have it in her own words. She writes, I had sat in that meadow 100 times. I knew how it felt when I was alone in it, and I knew how it felt when there was something else there. There was something else there. I did not see it. I did not hear it. I simply knew. The way you know the weather is about to change before the weather changes. She put down her book. She looked at the tree line. Nothing. She looked at the rhododendron thicket on the uphill side of the meadow. Nothing she could see. But the feeling did not go away. And after a while, she did something she describes as instinctive, as not thought through, as something her body did before her mind had a chance to object. She spoke, she said, out loud, to the meadow. "I know you're there." She writes, "I do not know why I said it. I had not planned to say it. It came out of me the way things come out of you when you are not managing yourself carefully. When you are just being what you are in a place where you feel safe enough to be it. I had always felt safe in that meadow, and saying it out loud felt like part of that safety. Like the meadow was a place where honesty was possible." Nothing happened. She picked up her book. She read for another hour. And when she looked up, at the edge of the tree line, something was standing there. She writes about this with a precision that I find remarkable for a memory 63 years old. But then, she says, there are things you remember precisely because they are the kind of thing your mind photographs, rather than records. She writes, "It was at the edge of the oaks, maybe 30 feet away, in the shadow where the trees began. Very large, very dark, standing upright, which was the first thing I registered, that it was standing upright, because nothing that large stands upright in these mountains. It was looking at me. I could see the eyes, even in the shadow, catching the light the way eyes catch light. It did not move. I did not move. I think I stopped breathing for a moment, not from fear, but from the effort of taking it in, of understanding what I was seeing, of letting what I was seeing be what it actually was, rather than something more convenient. She sat very still. It stood very still." She writes, "I thought about my grandmother, my mother's mother, who had grown up on this same road, who had told me once, when I was small, that the mountains held things that the mountains had always held, and that the right response to those things was respect and not curiosity, and certainly not fear. She said it the way she said most things, as if it were obvious, as if she were surprised to have to say it at all. I had not thought about that conversation in years. I thought about it in that meadow." She raised her hand, just slightly, just a small raising, an acknowledgement. It stood for another moment, and then it turned, and went back into the oaks, and was gone. She sat in the meadow until the light changed. And then she walked back down to the house, and she made supper, and she did not tell anyone. She went back to the meadow every day for the rest of that summer, not looking for it. She is careful to say that. Not looking, just going, the way she had always gone. It was there twice more. Once at the same edge of the tree line, in the early morning, briefly, before moving back into the oaks. Once, in late August, closer, 10 feet inside the tree line, visible between the trunks, watching her read. She did not look up directly. She was aware of it in the peripheral way that she was becoming aware of things. The way you become aware of things in a landscape, when you have stopped expecting the landscape to be empty. She read. It watched. After a while, it was gone. She writes, "That was the summer I understood something I had not understood before. That the mountains I grew up in were not mine in the way I had assumed they were mine. They were not anyone's in that way. They were older than ownership. And the things in them were older than I was, and older than my grandmother was, and older than anyone on that road had been. And being in their presence required a different kind of self, a smaller and more honest self, than the self I was in the habit of being." She went to college in September. She became a teacher. She taught 4th grade for 34 years. She married a man named Gerald Voss, who was a good man, who died in 2003, and whom she misses in the plane. Daily way that you miss someone who was part of every ordinary thing. She never went looking for what she had seen. She never told anyone. She went back to the meadow when she could, when she visited her parents, and then when she visited the road itself. After her parents were gone and the house was sold and the road was all that was left of that part of her life. She went back to the meadow. She sat in her usual spot. She felt, sometimes, what she had felt in 1961. Not always, but sometimes, often enough. She writes, "I do not know if it is the same one. I do not know how long they live or whether they move or stay. I only know that the meadow still has that quality, that not alone quality, and that sitting in it feels like sitting in the presence of something that has been there a very long time, and that does not need anything from me, and that is not made more or less by my being there, but that registers my presence, the way old things register the presence of new things, with a patience that is not indifference, and an attention that is not threat. I am glad it is still there," she writes. "I have always been glad." I asked her, before I left that afternoon, if she was afraid. She looked at me the way she looks at things she has already considered carefully and does not need to reconsider. She said, "I was 18 years old, and something came out of the oaks and looked at me. And my first thought was my grandmother's voice telling me the mountains hold things the mountains have always held." She paused. She said, "I was not afraid. I was embarrassed." I said, "Embarrassed of what?" She said, "Of how small I had been thinking. For 18 years, I had been walking those mountains thinking they were a backdrop, something behind my life. And then something stepped out of the oaks, and I understood that I was the backdrop. I was the small thing in the large place, and I hadn't known that. And it seemed, at 18, like something I should have known." She picked up her Scrabble tiles. She said, "Your turn." I played my word. She beat me again. Of course she did. She has been paying attention to things I have not learned to pay attention to yet. She has been paying attention since 1961. And the Blue Ridge outside her window, purple in the late light, folded and green and older than any name we have put on it. The Blue Ridge is still there, and something in it, patient and dark and entirely its own, is still there too. My grandmother knows. She has known for 63 years, and she is glad. She told me so, in her own words, 3 pages, handwritten, which I will keep for the rest of my life.